This is Dayna Johnson, and you're watching the Best Practices Show.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the Best Practices Show, where we take a look at the best business practices from the best dental practices all over the world. And if you're growing a great practice, you know one of the most important things to make the practice grow is cash flow. And today we're going to be talking about the top 6 ways you can improve cash flow. You do not want to miss this. So do me a favor, just grab a pen and hit the share button, and we're going to jump right into it. Now, before we get started, couple show notes. We are shooting this live on Facebook and having a ton of fun doing it. So as you guys are watching, if you have questions, feel free to add them to the feed, and I will ask Dayna the questions directly while she's on the show so we can get you the right answers, because we want you to get the most out of this too. And also keep sending us suggestions for shows. I got a ton of them yesterday on things that you want to see, and we will do our best to line up some great shows and bring you some great content. And again, today is no exception. This is very, very important, good stuff. And my guest today, Dayna's been a friend of ours for a long time. And before we get into the aspect of cash flow, just tell everybody who Dayna Johnson is. And, you know, if you're out there, I saw you a couple weeks ago, and we get a chance to speak together at some of these meetings. But if somebody hasn't seen you, tell them who you are and what you do.
So what do I do and who I am? Wow. I mean, I've been in dentistry for, 25 years. And so I kind of fell into dentistry, actually. My plan was college, and I wanted to be a big marketing executive. And the bank I was working at filed bankruptcy, and I was all of a sudden out of a job. And so I went to work for my uncle. And, you know, I used to build computers. I used to, out on a table, I used to put all the computer parts together. And so that's where I really found my love of technology. And even though I was complaining about the technology this morning, I love technology. And so one of my favorite things to do is to help practices optimize their software. During my tenure at my second practice, I became a certified Dentrix trainer. And so I had a lot of offices that were asking me to help them go paperless and to implement electronic health records. And so my love of technology and my skills with practice management software really kind of, you know, jump-started me in the training and consulting field. So that's kind of how I got started.
Yeah, and we always need great people like you, because the software utilization aspect of dentistry that's a whole nother subject. We can talk about that, but it's amazing how many people are trained in these positions and they don't know how to fully utilize the software. And so we're going to get into that just a little bit, but maybe you and I can do a different show on how all that works. But let's talk about, I always like to talk about the why before we get into the how. Now, cash flow, you and I have been doing this for a long time. We see how cash flow impacts a practice, but why is cash flow more important now than ever, and having expertise within your practice on managing this more important than ever?
Absolutely. You know, it's kind of, you know, back when I first started working in dentistry, I worked for a dental practice that had, you know, systems in place, and we were a goal-oriented practice. We worked with an amazing practice management organization, practice management coach and consultant. And so I learned from the very beginning how important systems were, and to have really a systematic approach to everything you did in the office. But when I went to work for my second dental practice, I remember my very first day in the practice, and the doctor's wife, she was also the office manager, she pulls me into the office. And so we're going through our orientation, and one of the things that she said to me was, oh, and by the way, the doctor hasn't received a paycheck in over 4 months.
Wow.
I know. And I'm like, okay, no pressure. And so I sat at my desk the very first day. I started going through the inbox. I found that there was over $25,000 worth of insurance claims that had not been sent out. They just did not have any systems in place. So that really became my why was, oh my gosh, there are practices out there that need these types of systems, because I came from a practice that had everything in place. We had an amazing AR, we had goals in place, we all worked off the same rules. And then I went to work in my second practice and I'm like, oh my gosh, they don't have anything in place. So I took my experience and started putting protocols in place and teaching my team. And over the next 20 years of software training and going to courses and learning from experts like Catherine Eitel and Lois Banta and all these experts out in the field, I've just, learned and grown and developed, some of, kind of my own things. And I take from what they have taught me and go out and teach it to offices all over the country. And I love what I do. It's so fun to make a difference in the practice.
Yeah, and all those names you mentioned, there's such great givers to dentistry. There are people that really give back and they're experts. And now you're the expert or one of the experts in this conversation. And cash flow, we see it all the time in coaching. I would say cash flow is to your practice what oxygen is to the body. It can't exist unless you create a business, because we can talk about core values and everything. But, the truth of it is, at the end of the day, it's still a business. While it's not the focus, it's still part of the business and cash flow. And when, it's so funny you say that about that conversation with the other dentists. There are so many dentists I run into, and that's still the issue. They're still not taking a paycheck. And what happens is not only are you stressed, but it also breeds resentment. You get mad. I was talking to a dentist this week, and he said the turning point for me was when I realized I was just going to work so other people could have jobs. Now, it's not the team member's fault. It was his fault for not having a business that was profitable enough in order to be able to take care of it.
Like you and I talked, before we even came on, you're the big picture guy. You help with the leadership and the helping to cultivate the dentist. And then I'm a systems girl. I go in and help the team develop. I'm in the trenches with them every day, and I help dig them out of these holes that they're in, because they need the leadership from the doctor first, and then I can come in and help them with the system. So it's a great marriage in that aspect with me and other consultants. I work with other consultants a lot, so it's a really great marriage that way.
Absolutely. We always stay within our scope and get the experts in there that need to get some of the important work done like this. Now, we're going to talk about the 6 ways to improve cash flow, and take us through the methodology, because you and I walked through each one of these, and I totally agree. So let's start with the most important one, which is number 1.
Number 1, train patient behavior. And so we have to remember that we are training patient behavior every day, almost in everything we do, because our patients don't know how they should act in your practice. And if you don't train them from the very beginning, they're going to make up their own rules, or they're going to act in a way that they did at their old practice. If they're switching dentists, or if they're coming from another state, they're going to assume that all dental practices are the same. And if you don't train them from the very first phone call, then they're going to walk into their office with their own set of rules, and then it's just going to escalate from there. And so one of the first things I help with offices is help them create a really good intake form. And that's where we want to build the relationship first. We want to, definitely find out how they found for new patients, how they found our practice, how they, what they're looking for in a doctor. And then we get to the details. We get to the financial details, because I think it's extremely important to talk about those financial details especially with our new patients, because we have to set their expectations from the very first phone call.
Yeah.
And I know that there are consultants out there that don't want their dental teams to talk about money on the first call. I happen to disagree with that philosophy. I think that having an open, honest, transparent conversation with our patients is the best way. I think that you build trust with your patients if you're honest about what's expected on the day of service. If you're honest about your contract relationship with their insurance company. I think if you're honest with them about what their out-of-pocket is going to be for that first visit or any visit, I think you build trust with the patient when you're honest with them about money. And so it's important to have a team member on the phone call, the first phone call, or anytime you're discussing appointments or treatment with a patient, is somebody that feels very comfortable about talking about money, because you need to set the expectations for the patient, or like I said, they're going to make up their own rules.
Yeah, and those rules aren't always the best rules. And sometimes the prisoners run the prison, and you don't want to do that, and that's not the best analogy. But you get a sense of this. We always say we teach people how to treat us. We teach them how to behave in a business. Look at any business. When you go to Costco, they don't go, hey, you want to pay a little bit today? No, you're expected to pay. What you use the magic word, which is expectations. You're training these people how to behave. And here's the thing. If you're watching this, you're like, gosh, that would be hard or mean. No, people love structure. They love to know what to expect. And they love even more that you can provide exactly what you told them to expect. Any great restaurant, any great business, and any great practices teaches people how to pay or how to show up in a practice. And I think it all comes back to good training and confidence on the phone. The person that answers your phone, they don't represent your business. They are your business, if I don't know.
They're the face of your business. And, I was just mentioning having a good intake form. And, one thing that I created for a few of my offices is, a basic intake form where you start with the relationship and you build into the money towards the end. But I also included some common questions that they might get.
Right.
Like, are you in network with my insurance? And how would you answer that in your practice? So give your team some sample verbal skills, and so that they can all speak the same language. Right. I read an article once on a Southwest Airlines magazine, and they talk about how if people want to be led down the path that you want that they should be going down. So if they're calling your practice for an appointment and you don't direct them down the path you want them to go, then they're just going to go off on their own, pathway. So I think it's really important that the whoever's taking the call has that skill, that verbal skill, to lead the patient down the path to the end result that you want to get them to.
Yeah, and absolutely. And this is a good thing to think about. Like, these people are calling your office all day, and they're trying to get in. They're trying to get in. And all too often, we don't lead them down that path. We're like, no. I can't mislead them. You got to lead them the right way and be completely honest, because there's still one thing that drives dentistry, and it always will. It's called trust. And that trust is established at the first phone call. Now,
I believe that for sure.
Once we start down the path of training our patients, where do we go next? Like, what's option number 2, or let's say non-negotiable number 2 in improving cash flow in a practice?
So number 2 is definitely collecting on the day of service. And, I find it really interesting how many practices say, oh yeah, we collect at 100% on the day of service. In fact, I was working with a doctor up in Alaska several years ago, and, he didn't even want me to go through like billing statements or anything else, because they were going to collect 100% on the day of service. And I'm like, okay, great. That is a good goal to have for sure, but not all practices do it.
Right.
And, there's so much money that walks out the door because they don't have a system in place for collecting on the day of service. Mm-hmm. And it all starts with, like we said, setting the expectation for the patient as to what's expected on that appointment. So I think it is important that we do check on insurance benefits so we can see at least estimated what the patient's out-of-pocket is. Patients, I believe that patients typically, most patients, I don't think they really care whether you're in network or out of network, but what they do want to know is, what is the bottom line for me? Mm-hmm. What am I going to owe out of pocket on that visit? So I think it's important that you at least know, what is the patient going to owe on that day? And And then how are they going to pay for it? One of the rules in my practice back in the day when I was working was nobody got on my schedule without a financial arrangement. Mm-hmm. And that was a rule of mine. And so if every patient that was on our appointment book knew how much they were going to owe that day. And we had a system in place for collecting on the day of service. And then that kind of segues us into the third one, which is you have to involve your entire team.
Right.
And because collections, especially collections on the day of service, is an entire team event. It doesn't fall just on your front office team. Mm-hmm. I was working with a team up in Seattle. We were doing some a remote call, and they were putting together a dental assisting cross-training day. And I said, fantastic. And they're like, okay, what are like the top 3 things we should teach our assistants? And I'm like, number 1, we need to teach them to collect money over the counter.
Yeah.
And we have to teach our team, our entire team, our doctors, our assistants, our hygienists, also how to use the credit card machine.
Yeah, but a lot of people have alligator arms, which means they can't reach. I can't do that. Like, I can't reach. I've never been trained how to swipe a credit card. What would you say to that?
I'm like, I just think that we have to remember that collections is a team event. Right. And because if you don't collect, then there's not money for payroll. Right. And if the doctor's not getting paid, then eventually the team isn't going to get paid. Right. And I have seen so much money walk out the door. And it's incredible to me how the clinical team dismiss the patient and not even think twice about if the patient owes money. So when we think about involving the team, we have to think of a couple things, okay? We have to know where that financial arrangement is, okay? So this is kind of where the practice management management software comes into play. And so what I encourage you all to do when you're on this call right now is find a place in your practice management software where your entire team is going to be able to find that patient copay for today.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Now, I got a couple things. I want to go deep into that concept, but Linda Miles is watching right now, and she's giving you a shout out. Kind of like she's like the hero, or if there was a Hall of Fame, she would be the first inductee into. Yeah. Exactly. And kind of like the honorary, I don't even know how to describe her. Like she's the pinnacle. And she just said, I can't believe I've known you for years. And just today heard you present. Fabulous, Dayna. So congratulations.
Yeah, and Linda's amazing and one of my mentors for sure.
Yeah. And Linda, we got to get you on. I know you're retired, but I don't even know how to define that because you're always helping in some way. And then also, too, we're getting questions now and a couple things. Deepak, our good friend, who always asks great questions, and you guys keep asking questions. I'll forward them to Dayna. He asked this question, how do you feel about collecting before we take patients back? What's your thoughts on that?
I love it. And in fact, I just implemented that in a practice up in Seattle because they have large treatment plans, especially for a lot of the surgery offices, the oral surgery practices, periodontal offices that are doing long appointments. Patients are maybe groggy when they come out. They don't want to stop at the front desk. Or even a general practice who is doing longer visits. I think it's a great patient benefit because we have to turn it into a patient benefit. Right. If we're going to ask the patient to collect before they go in the back, we do have to turn it into a patient benefit. So So how would you say that? Like, I know you're a master of verbal skills, but give me one of your favorite ways to explain that as a benefit. So I think it's just, our patients have found that it saves you time walking out if we just take care of all the logistics before you go in the back. We know sometimes, you're rushing out the door or you have, kids to go pick up. So try and find something personal about that patient. And that you can interject into that. But a lot of times you say, many of our patients have found that it is easier if we just take care of the money before you go in the back. And then patients are like, oh, sure, no worries. Now, many offices have asked me, well, what if the treatment plan changes during the visit? If it changes significantly, then maybe you could talk about that. But if it's like you don't do a buildup, or maybe you change a surface on a composite filling, I've always just said, let's just stick to the original plan and let the patient know. I know the doctor ended up doing an extra surface on that filling. Instead of a 2 surface, we did a 3 surface. Let's just wait and see. I know you already collected. Let's just wait and see what your insurance covers. If you end up with a patient balance, we'll send you a statement. I don't think I would take a lot of time to rewrite it and recollect it, void the credit card. Just keep it the way it is. Keep it simple. I try and keep things simple when I work with offices, and then see what happens. If you ended up doing, a lot less work on the patient, then let the patient know. Let's see what the insurance covers, and then if we owe you a credit, we'll send you a refund right away. I have found most patients really aren't too worried about it.
Yeah, that is so great, Dayna. I love the way you put that. And obviously for hygiene, this is a little bit easier than the restorative financial arrangements, but we have a lot of practices now that are watching us. They're working straight 8s without lunches. And the time aspect is important when it comes to financial arrangements. You can't have team members sitting around waiting to close out the day when you're working a straight 8. So a lot of the team members we see, when it comes to even something as simple as hygiene, they'll say, Mrs. Jones, best we know today, your fee is this. Let's get that taken care of before you go to the back, because we're going to walk to our cars together. And patients are like, oh, that's so nice, And it really comes with the confidence and the belief that it's in the best interest of everybody involved. And then if there are any changes, totally agree with what you're saying. Now, can I just add one more thought? Because what you're saying is so great. I just want to cheer you on. So, the thing you got to remember, this isn't about money, because while we're talking about money creates predictability later on. You guys all know this. When you get the fee, people what? They show up. So this is an important part of collecting, is that it creates predictability in processes that happen after the fee. No different than booking a VRBO or paying for airline flights before you get on the flight. Like everybody knows, payment equals predictability. So don't look at it as let's get the money. It's the process.
And also to add to that, if you are going to collect before the patient is seated, then have that conversation before you schedule them. Right. During that treatment financial consult. This oral surgery office I work at in California, they have that conversation at the time they're scheduling. So they let the patient know, we're going to take care of all these consent forms. We're going to collect your copay before you're seated for your appointment, so that we don't have to take care of any of those loose ends, after your procedure.
Right. And can I be just a little devil's advocate? Because I want to know what your thoughts are. There are a lot of young dentists that watch, or they come to these things and they go, it's so easy for you guys to talk this, but my practice is 100% PPO. I have 5,000 patients. Mm-hmm. How do I collect money in those cases? I mean, sometimes we just got to start small, right? And before we go to what would you say to a dentist under those circumstances? Same rules apply, or?
That's 100% PPO practice.
Yeah.
The patient's still going to have out of pocket, even with a PPO practice. We're talking mostly about restorative operative procedures when the patient has a copay. Right. If they're a PPO practice, now we can collect easily from our cash patients, but our insurance patients, it's important that the practice does estimate as best they can. Right. And when you are a PPO practice, we need to know what the fee schedules are. And, it takes a little bit more work on the front end. But I believe the work on the front end that you do to create the best estimate you can for the patient saves you a ton of time on the back end.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally.
So take the work, do the work on the front end, check their benefits. If you're not contracted, then estimate a little low. Mm-hmm. And so that I'd much rather over collect from the patient and issue them a refund and have them be happy than underestimate and have to collect money from them. So I having a PPO practice takes a little bit more work on the front end for the team because they have to get a really good estimate, and the patient needs to know about what their out-of-pocket is going to be, and then let your team know where's that out-of-pocket going to be in our practice management software. So when the patient walks in for their appointment, and maybe your front office team member is using the restroom, or they're on a new patient call and they're not available, that dental assistant or that even the doctor is able to collect the out-of-pocket for that day. And they can run the credit card through, and they can give the patient a receipt. So the team should know how to run the credit cards, where the receipt book is. If you have an integrated credit card processing system, it might even post it automatically into the patient practice management software. I mean,
Yep.
wouldn't that be amazing? So
yeah. Absolutely. Now I want to go back because it was so good when you involved the entire team, because it's such an important point. Can you just give us some perspective? So if I'm a dentist watching this and I go, Dayna, I understand what you're saying, but where do I start? Like, how would I even get the team involved in the collection process?
Well, I am a huge fan of being transparent with my numbers with my team. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, I came from a practice where we did a monthly numbers meeting, and we not only talked about our production and collection and case acceptance and patient retention numbers, but we also talked about the practice overhead numbers.
Okay.
And I know that's kind of gets uncomfortable for doctors sometimes, but I think it's important for the team to know that they work for a small business. They're not just doing teeth cleanings every day. They're not just placing fillings. They're not just in the healthcare field, but you are working for a small business. And I personally feel it's important to be open about your practice overhead numbers, because the overhead is what gives you the ability to incentivize your team and be able to maybe dangle a carrot in front of your team about maybe a bonus or a vacation or maybe a high-level CE course that's happening in, Boca Raton, Florida or something.
Right.
If we're ever able to give our team any kind of raises, incentives, bonus programs, it's all based on overhead, and everything revolves around collections when you're talking overhead. And so I think it's really important for those new doctors to know their overhead, and also be courageous about sharing that overhead number with your team, because they can help you control it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big part of getting everybody, you use the word engaged and then involved. And I'm sure you're seeing this trend. Sometimes team members just need to be included in the conversation. Oftentimes, a chairside assistant will just go right into chairside assisting or hygienist. And a lot of the big DSOs now, if you're a private care practitioner, you're watching this, you need to know this. But a lot of the big DSOs are learning that we've got to have everybody cross-trained for a lot of different reasons. So people that start or are hired to work at the front, where they start? They start in the back, and they will shadow a clinical assistant to get a good sense of how things work. They also know how things should be scheduled. And the second thing that or the third thing they say is, this is the worst job ever. And the assistants go, yes, it is, and they go, and they have a mutual appreciation. That way you don't have, and then they go to a couple days in sterilization now. And the same thing is true vice versa. So people that are hired, each person starts in the opposite place, so that when we come together, now everyone can do everything. And that's the fastest way to get everybody involved in understanding this. And I'll just say this. Can I say this, Dayna? It's not that hard to swipe a credit card. Like you just grab it and you go like that, right? So many people are so afraid of doing that, right?
Yeah. And, give them a 3-step tip sheet on how to do it, or have the instructions taped on the back side of the credit card machine or something. It like you said, it's not that hard. And, one thing I just want to add, if there's new doctors listening, is I don't expect you to be transparent about all your overhead numbers. I'm talking like if your overhead is at 75%, and you want to get it down to 55 or 60, your team is the best way to get that number down.
Mm-hmm.
They can help you. They are the ones that are running your small business. And so you involve them, because then they feel like they're part of the ownership of this practice. It gives them so much empowerment, and it makes you feel so good as a team member.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of you might say, well, I don't want to show them my cost, my team compensation costs. Just a little tidbit. That is called an investment. Try to change the word cost into invest. I'm investing team compensation, which is a much better way to think about the people in your office, because they want to help and they want to help you with the ROI. Now, let's talk about number 4, which is the stuff that you're really good at. What's number 4?
So number 4 came about when I was working. So when I first started working in my second practice, now, of course, team members are usually trained from the existing team member there. So I was trained by the other financial coordinator at my practice. And of course, everybody always did statements monthly. We do our billing statements once a month, either on the 1st or the 15th or the 30th. But it seems like every practice I work with does this monthly statement run. And so I started out that way. And this is what happens. You do your billing statements, and maybe depending on the size of your practice, you may have 50 to 300 billing statements. You may be in that range somewhere. So it might take you 3 or 4 days to go through them and make your personal notes on there. And then once you're ready to send them, then you have to find the envelopes. And I remember having one of those lickers, all the statement envelopes lined up on my desk, and, licking all the envelopes. And I mean, oh my gosh, it was just such a headache to do 3 or 4 days worth of billing statements. And then
I always get paper cuts like right here when you're like, oh,
I know. And then what happens after you send your statements, then you get this huge spike of money, right? The next week, and you get this huge spike of phone calls.
Right.
And so then you're telling your front office team, just tell everybody I'm on vacation, it's because you don't want to deal with all these phone calls. And so during my practice, it took me a couple of years, but I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do statements. This is driving me crazy. It was so stressful for me, and I didn't like it at all. And it made me just dislike accounts receivable. And I'm like, okay, there's got to be a better way. So I figured it out in my practice management software. And as you all know, I'm a Dentrix guru. I'm the Dentrix expert. And so I just figured out how I could send statements every day if I wanted to. But I decided I was going to send statements on Monday when I got back from the weekend. So I'd post all the weekend mail. I would do a statement run. And then on Thursday, I would get my big Delta Dental check. I would post my Delta Dental check, and I would do another statement run before the weekend. So what happened is I cut my monthly statements down from, a couple hundred a month to maybe 10 or 20 a week.
Okay.
And in your practice management software, so if you're find out how you can send statements every day, because then what happens is patients are still on a 30-day cycle, but everybody's on a different ending date.
Right.
So the patients that send statement today on the 23rd, then they won't get another statement until June 23rd. But then if you send the statements, on Friday, which is the 25th, then they won't get another statement until June 25th. So everybody's still on a 30-day cycle. But what it did is it evened out our cash flow.
Right.
And it evened out the phone calls.
Right.
I mean, life was good.
Yeah, and essentially what you're saying is just create a system, and it's part of your daily checklist of responsibilities that have to be done. And were you doing those at the beginning of the day, throughout the day, at the end of the day? Like, give us a sense of that.
Exactly.
Like how you did it.
Yeah, so I set up my system where it was a Monday, Thursday.
Okay.
So it would be a Monday afternoon after I posted up my weekend mail, and then it was a Thursday afternoon before I left for the weekend. So that's
Right.
how I set up my system. Now, some people are just doing it like every day, like at the end of their day, where they're doing maybe 2 or 3 statements a day.
Right.
And it's beautiful, and it works really well. And so, what I found was my doctor loved it because we didn't have this big spike in money, and then it would trickle off, throughout the rest of the month. So he loved the consistency of money coming in. So it worked really well for that. And then it just, saved me the headache of having to spend 3 or 4 days, doing all those personalized statements. And it really helped with my sanity. It helped with the cash flow of the practice, and it just saved a ton of time. And so if you think about it, think about a patient that comes in today, and they come in and they forget their checkbook, of course, or they don't have a credit card. They don't pay their copay today.
Which is always fascinating to me because I often leave the house without my wallet, never,
Yeah,
right?
I know, right. And so if you have a patient that doesn't pay their copay today, and then like today's the 23rd of May, and your statement run isn't scheduled until the June 1st, they're going to go like 2 weeks, a week and a half before they even get a billing statement.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're set up to do statements tomorrow, then they're going to get a billing statement before the weekend.
Yeah.
So
it really works.
Yeah, it really speeds up the time between the date of service and the time you get paid.
Yeah, Lori Owens is watching and she says, "Love that, Dayna." She says,
I love Lori.
She's awesome. She's just brilliant. Yeah. I learn so much from you guys all the time. She says, "We do them weekly." So the important point is that you just have a system and not waiting to do it until, because that one day a month, that's a terrible day for all of us. You know what I mean? Like you can't get anything done that day, I think, in some cases.
I know. And so it really just changed my life in the dental practice. So I encourage all the office managers that are listening, get outside of that monthly statement run and try this. And if you're using Dentrix, reach out to me directly. If you're using something other than Dentrix, you can still reach out to me and I can try and point you to the right people. Some of my best friends use other softwares. Laura Hatch is an EagleSoft guru.
She's amazing.
I know. And, so let me know what you're using and I can try and point you in the right direction.
That sounds awesome. And we're getting more questions here, and I got to put on my glasses for this one. Our good friend Deepak. Gosh, Deepak, I love your questions. He says, one of the potential limitations in cash flow comes from a suspicion the patient may have as the reasonableness and fairness of the office's prices for services. Often all they go by is your low price competitor or insurance fee schedules. Any nugget in how best to communicate that our prices are indeed fair? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, wow. He's getting into some real high level conceptual.
He's brilliant. Like I got to think about his question before I can even deliver an answer. So, I
think one of the things that I hear a lot in my my high level practices, that are fee for service is they say something like, we don't allow insurance to dictate our care for our patients. Mm-hmm. And, our fees are based on the types of materials we use, the education of our team members, and the, what we put into our treatment. And we just don't let insurance dictate optimum care for our patients. And, it is. So I definitely think that when you are thinking of those types of questions that you get from patients, is have some of those sample verbal skills on your intake form or have them somewhere at your front desk. So when those questions do come up, the team member that's taking the call is not stumped. They can maybe put the patient on hold, find what the kind of the script is for that question, and then make sure that they are all speaking the same language.
Yeah, and I love how you always set things as expectations, and I'm not as good as you in verbal skills, but I've heard offices say, in the first phone call, if you're looking for cheap, you're not going to find that here, but if you're looking for the best, you called the right place. and letting them know. And I've also heard there's one team member, I love how she says this. She says, Mrs. Jones, before we come in, I just want to let you know a couple things. While we value your insurance, please understand that your insurance may only cover a portion or anything, or if anything, that you and the doctor discuss, because all of our treatment is going to be based on your care, not on the limitations of your benefits. And while we honor that, and then I love this one, like people always say, well, you're so expensive. I always love this one. You can say, Mrs. Jones, I understand this is a considerable investment, but there's no less expensive way to do anything than the right way the first time. Now, everybody's had that experience where you pay too much. So I don't know if there's a good answer for that, but Dayna's really good. And Deepak, I hope that helps you as far as helping people understand, like, we have a fair fee and we're proud of it.
Yeah. Well, and, I think you also have to look back on what your practice mission statement is.
Right.
I always try and point my practices back to, what does it say in your practice mission statement? And try and pull out a few of those phrases or sentences right out of what's written from your mission statement. And that may be posted on a wall in your reception room. It might be on your website. But reread your practice mission statement and pull some of the language right out of there, because you've already written that, and that shows why you treat patients. That
Right.
is the reason why patients come to see you. And so those are the reasons why your fees might be what they are, is because that's how you treat patients. And it could be that you're using the highest level technology, and you don't allow insurance to dictate your treatment plan for the patient. And find what those great phrases are that are already written in your mission statement.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's go on to number 5, which I also love. And
Is your favorite?
I don't know. It's hard for me to choose my favorite because there's a lot of good ones on here. What's number 5 on increasing cash flow in a practice?
So number 5 is stop giving insurance companies so much power.
Wait. Don't they own everything? Aren't they in charge of everything? Why shouldn't we give them all this power?
Oh my gosh. I don't know where they came up with that they rule the world. And it's terrible. It's like the thorn in everybody's side. And it's such a racket. And so where this came from, this was actually, I added this one in recently. And it came from, do you go to ADOM?
No, well, first of all, I love ADOM. It's just I haven't been able to get there, and they are just amazing people, like unbelievable.
Yeah. So I go to the ADOM conference, and I was at the ADOM conference last year. It was 2017, and I was in the audience of a panel that our good friend Teresa Duncan was moderating. And so Teresa Duncan was moderating a panel of insurance industry people. Like there was a representative from GEHA.
Right.
There was a representative
Sandy
from
Hudson on there too, right?
representative. I don't remember their names. I just remember where they were from. A representative from Dentegra, a rep from NEA, and a rep from Unlock the PPO. And it was a panel of people that understand the insurance industry. And so Teresa, she was so funny. When she was giving kind of the rules to the audience, she's like, okay, you guys need to be kind. They're here as a volunteer to help you understand insurance better. And she goes, no throwing rotten tomatoes. Okay, you need to be kind with your questions. And so it was really funny. But they had a lot of really good information at this panel. And the number one thing I learned was to stop sending paper. And I was amazed that offices are still sending paper claims, because when I teach office and I go into an office, I'm like, you should never have to send a paper claim. And
now tell us why, because I still see paper claims, and tell us why that's so important.
Well,
that piece of advice.
There could be a possibility that the insurance company doesn't accept paper, or they don't accept electronic attachments, or maybe there's still an insurance plan that doesn't accept a electronic claim. However, I wouldn't want you to send a paper claim out of your office because there's no way for you to track it.
Wait. You mean there's not somebody in a mailroom just pulling one out of every 4 and throwing it into the trash?
I know.
Or one out of every 2?
Exactly. That's exactly what they do. So, and so find a way within your clearinghouse that you should never have to send a claim on paper, because you need a tracking number for that claim. And so when I say stop giving insurance companies so much power, what happens is we check on the insurance claim, we're calling the rep and we're saying, hey, why haven't we gotten paid? And the rep says, oh, we don't have your claim. And then we just send them a new one. And I'm like, stop doing that. I want you to take your confirmation number that you've received from your clearinghouse or from the insurance company, and you should get a confirmation number if you're sending an electronic claim that says this is the confirmation number, and hold that insurance company accountable to that claim.
Okay.
So if they say, we don't have your claim, you're like, yes, you do. Here's my confirmation number, and hold them accountable.
Right.
So
right.
That's number one. Number two that I learned from this panel was if you are sending a paper claim, for example, and you're putting like pink highlighter on it that says this is an appeal, and you're putting, or a yellow highlighter highlighting your beautiful narrative. Okay, what this panel said, that anytime you send a claim with something other than black ink or blue or black ink, it gets kicked out.
Yeah. See, you taught me that. And I'm like, no. See, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that until I heard it from them.
Okay.
And they said if you put a pink highlighter or a yellow highlighter, because you want to like bring it to the rep's attention, that claim now automatically gets kicked out. So as soon as your claim comes into the clearinghouse or comes into the insurance company, it gets scanned in. And so the scanner cannot see that highlighter. And in fact, it's going to actually turn it black.
Wow.
So then they can't even see what you're highlighting. So as soon as the claim comes in, it gets scanned. And so if there's anything on there that's not scannable, it gets kicked out, and it's going to slow your claim down. And so I learned that. I'm like, wow, that's pretty powerful information.
Yeah, I had no idea when you told me that, and I think that's kind of crazy, but that's pretty wild and very important to know why you can't do paper. So good stuff. Now, a big thing as we move into number 6, this is a big one too, and you can see there's a science behind it, but give us number 6 first.
So number 6, you need to have a consistent AR management system, accounts receivable management system. So, unfortunately, we're not going to collect 100% over the counter. That is our goal, but we do know that it's just not going to happen. So we will end up with some accounts receivable. And then we need to have a systematic approach. Collections is not emotional. Don't make it emotional. It's black and white, okay? You had a treatment plan. You knew what your out-of-pocket was. We estimated the best we could. Your insurance paid less, or you walked out without paying. So now we're having to collect money. And every patient has a story. And I get that. I get that every patient has a story. But we also have to have a very systematic approach to managing our past due account balances. So what that means is, do you have what report are you using in your practice management software for managing your accounts receivable? That's number one, is what report do I use? So I go into offices all the time and they're like, oh gosh, I don't even know, or I'm using this report and it's just not even the right one. And so know what is the best accounts receivable report in your practice management software.
And do you have a favorite report? What's your favorite?
Yeah. So since I'm a Dentrix girl, we have to remember we've got accounts receivable in 2 buckets. Okay. We have the insurance bucket and we have the patient bucket. And so you need to know what is your outstanding claims, what claims are overdue. So you have a report that shows you your unpaid insurance claims. And then you also have this bucket for unpaid patient balances. So my favorite report in the Dentrix world is the collection manager. So definitely seek that one out. If you use a practice management software other than Dentrix, then let me know who you use, and I can point you to the right person. But with the what report do you use first, and then where do you make notes in your practice management software, so that if the doctor ever wanted to see what kind of calls you're making, or you want to follow back up with the patient, or maybe you have a new team member, where are you going to find those notes, your phone call notes? When do you send your first letter, your first collection letter? What's your protocol for sending an account to a collection agency? I mean, unfortunately, sometimes we have to do that, but you have to have a protocol for that. Yeah. And so making sure that you have a very systematic, at 30 days, we do this. At 45 days, we do this. At 60 days, we do this. And at 90 days, we do this. So it needs to be written down. Everybody follows the process, and that's how we manage accounts receivable.
Yeah, now everybody has their thoughts on this, and you've heard this debate for years. What are good targets? Do you have reasonable good targets that you see in AR now that you would say that's a good target?
Are you looking at like the AR ratio?
AR ratio, AR, people are talking about AR ratio and AR days. I mean, if we were to simplify it for just this conversation, what's a healthy range if somebody's watching this?
So still the gold standard for collection percentage is still 98% or above, for sure. Mm-hmm. But when we look at the AR ratio, that's your accounts receivable total compared to your production, your monthly production number. In a general practice, I want to see that below 1.0. Mm-hmm. I want to see it below. So your accounts receivable is below a month's gross production. That's what I want to see. I don't know how you feel about that, but
totally agree. And again, it's not about the money. It's just that anytime you find it higher than that, there's always problems, and the problems get bigger because the further it goes down the line, and like you said, unfortunately, people have to go to collections. You are now in lose-lose. Yes. And people that owe you money do not like you. They don't. You can argue all you want. But if you're out of equity with somebody and they owe you money, they're avoiding you. They don't think well of you. So don't get in a situation where people don't pay. And then we've all been in situations where, you don't pay for something and you get the experience, and then somebody comes after you the money like a month or two later, and you're like, I don't even like you guys, and I had a great time. You want to get the money at the time of service as much as possible.
I know. And so, then you have to think about, okay, what's your over 90-day past due balance? And oh my gosh, I don't know how many times I go in to work with practices and their over 90-day past due balance is like 30 to 40%.
Right.
I'm like, oh my gosh, how did this even happen? Mm-hmm. And, so we definitely want to see that over 90 down, probably hover around 10 to 15. And because if you look at a balance, look at a $500 balance at 30 days past due, you've already lost $50. Right. It's only worth $450. But and this number comes from a research study. So this is how your accounts receivable loses ground over time. So at 90 days, a $500 balance is only worth $300.
Yeah. And I get to see some weird stuff as you do. I mean, I was in a practice years ago, and this guy, I asked him what his receivables were. He said he didn't know. Yeah. So I printed it out. It was like this. I said, there's over $1.2 million in here. He's like, no way. I go, that's your retirement plan. Like, you could have retired. Yeah. And he's like, So you don't want to get in a situation where these are compounding interest in the wrong way. Like, think about that. It's just, I would say it's not about the money. It's about having healthy expectations and then training people how to behave, which is what you so brilliantly said at the beginning. So
it all starts on the front end. And, I just let offices know, do more work on the front end, because you will build patient trust. You will build that relationship if you just honor that work on the front end. Because when you get to the back end and you're trying to collect over 90, you've now broke the trust with your patients. You've lost the patient. You've lost the referral. Now it's frustrating. It's stressful. So do the work on the front end. It's it's more fun. I mean, it grows the relationships with your patients.
Yeah, I am so grateful. Like this is such good thinking, especially if you're a younger dentist and you're buying a practice. Like there are sometimes you got to change the culture, behavior, and you got to go down the path that Dayna so eloquently lit for us on these 6 things. Now, Dayna, any last thoughts before we wrap up? Just anything that you would say to young dentists getting started, or even mature dentists that are in this wonderful profession of dentistry?
I think the most important thing is you just have to treat your practice, your dental practice, as a small business, and involve your team. Don't be afraid to be transparent about some of these numbers. Have the courage to have a monthly numbers meeting and really involve your team, because they are the ones that run your practice every day. They are the ones that are in the trenches with the patients. So the more you are open with your team about numbers, the more they will feel like they're part of the ownership of this practice. They'll take on this, they will ride to the end of the earth for you, if you just treat them like part of the practice, treat them like an owner of the practice, and they will go to the ends of the earth for you.
Amen. Amen to that. Now, I know people are going to watch this and they're going to say, how do I get a hold of her? So Dayna, now keep in mind, people are listening to this on iTunes also. So how can we find you if we need to get a hold of you?
So the best way to reach me is by email. So my email is Dayna, Dayna, at Novone, Novonee.com. If you want to check out my website, it's novone.com. And I look forward, even if you're not a Dentrix user, reach out to me. I can point you to some of my friends who are working with other practice management softwares. And because all these things I talked about could be implemented in no matter what system you're using. So just reach out and ask me questions.
Absolutely. And I've got a lot more questions. We're gonna go down and take a look at a lot of these different things on future episodes with Dayna. So keep sending us suggestions and things you want us to ask her. But Dayna, I am so crazy grateful. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge for all of us. I mean, I got some good thoughts already today. So it's good stuff. So stick around while we say goodbye to everybody else. And thank you guys for watching today. If you enjoyed today, which I know you did, just do us a huge favor. Just hit the share button and share with your friends. Keep sending us suggestions. And until we see you next time, keep watching the Best Practice Show. You guys have a great rest of your day.